Good evening, everyone. I would like to start the East Whiteland Township Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. I apologize for the barking dogs in the background. But our first item would be to stand for the pledge. We have a flag on the screen, or everybody. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God,
and
indivisible, justice for all.
With justice for all. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, we need to approve our meeting minutes from March 24th, 2021. Has everybody reviewed them? And as Peter pointed out, Brittany, you did a fabulous job on these extensive notes. Anybody have any comments or changes? Hearing none, would somebody please make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the March 24th Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dante. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. I think we have everybody here except for, is John Lammer on? Okay, so John Lammer is absent tonight. Everyone else is here. And our first applicant is for 20 Moores Road, office building, Mountain Laurel Funding Company. It's a land development application to construct a 175,000 square foot office building, parking lot, sidewalk, and associated stormwater management facilities. Previously approved plans proposed 2 buildings totaling 186,000 square feet located in the same area of the site. The property located at 20 Moores Road is within the PO Professional Office District. Who's here for Mountain Laurel?
I am Deb Lou Colagreco representing the applicant. We have our civil engineer, Greg Newell, who's also on board. And Craig, do I see you on here? Craig Millsop, the owner representative. Craig Millsop is on as well.
Yep, I'm here.
Great, thank you, Craig. Craig has to.
Hi, everyone.
Craig has to leave us in about half an hour, but this is only going to be an overview. I don't expect a whole lot of detailed conversation this evening. If you want, Deb, I can give a brief introduction as to what's going on here, and then we can take it from there.
Yes, please, Lou. Thank you.
Okay, as you've properly stated, right now as we sit here, the site is approved for 2 office buildings. I believe it's about 187,000 square feet. We have that site plan if anybody cares to see it. This is the old, what everybody colloquially refers to as the Aegon campus. I guess we should start calling it the St. Gobain campus. But it's that parcel of property that's been before the township for 20, 25 years with redevelopment plans. Simply stated, prior to COVID, there was interest in the marketplace, not for a 2-building complex, but for a 1-building single user complex. So the owner of the property at that time, and again, this literally, we started this last February or March and then put the brakes on because of COVID. We submitted plans that envisioned a 1-story concept, less square footage, 1 building, 4 stories, less impervious coverage than the prior plan. We got a series of review letters over the past couple of weeks from the township consultants. And all I really wanted to do the plans obviously have to be cleaned up. There were a couple of errors on the plans, one of which we want to clear up tonight, had to do with landscaping and removing trees, which we want to correct that. But if you distill all of these comments into what's going on here, it's essentially taking 2 office buildings and making 1. And we're hoping now that we're coming out of COVID, that the interest that was in the marketplace at that time resurrects itself, but we need to be ready. We need to be shovel ready in case that opportunity presents itself again. there was a discussion with the original office approval of doing intersection improvements at Phoenixville Pike and Sidley. And there was a sketch plan submitted and approved with the previous application that showed how those improvements, what those improvements would be. The township and the applicant are re-looking at that. Apparently the township in Charlestown, unbeknownst to us, had some more ambitious plans for that intersection improvement. And we're now in the process of working with Chris Williams to see what we can do. We can't do what the newest iteration or thought was, but we can probably do part of it consistent with what we said we would do with the original approval. So I don't really want to get into that tonight. There's too many imponderables and unanswerable questions about that. We would just be talking in circles. We'll be prepared to talk about that the next time we come before the Planning Commission. So if it's okay with you, Deb, I'd like to confine the conversation to the site plan. Any questions about that? And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Newell, and maybe somebody can punch up that site plan, and Greg, you can use it and just walk the commission through this plan that's now pending for approval.
Sounds great. I'll let Zach pull that up for me, please.
Sure. Yeah, Greg, would you like the colorized plan or the black and white?
Why don't we start with the overall, the colorized overall one, Zach, kind of let me give it. The two smaller versions we may or may not need to get to, but the overall one that's colorized, I think would be helpful.
You got it.
So as Lou pointed out, this is the vacant parcels. There was a condominium subdivision that was done here, and we call them parcels 4 and 5. The previous approval, and maybe Zach, just a second, you want to pull up the old plan just to show them that, I'm sorry.
That's good.
So on the old plan here, you will see two buildings. The one on the right is building 4. And then that one there, and then building 5 was to the left. And they were tucked in where, if some of you are familiar out in the campus, there's a softball field and stuff like that around there. They were both 3-story buildings, and just a little clarification, it was about 197,500, roughly around there, 198,000 square feet between the two buildings. There was an existing entrance coming off of Moores Road. That was upgraded as part of the buildings 1 and 2, the St. Gobain campus. And then we were adding a new entrance down directly opposite the corporate park across the street there. So we were adding that new entrance in there. Thank you, Zach. With parking around it, pretty straightforward. This went through the approval process in 2016. So as we talked, we went in, the marketplace was shifting. There seemed to be more demand for a different type of building. So we then switched over to the idea of a 1 building, combining the 2 buildings into 1 and going from 3 stories to 4 stories. So if you can pull that one up, Zach, that'd be great. Okay. Are you able to zoom in a little bit more on that, Zach, please? There we go, perfect. So you'll see on this plan where building 4 was is no longer a building. That's just all parking. And the parking layout there is pretty much just the same as before. Just imagine where the building footprint is, we now show parking. We then changed building 5 from 3 stories to 4 stories. The ordinance permits that with a reduction in impervious coverage. I think it's about 10%, Zach, if I'm not mistaken. Do you?
It's 1 for 1. So with every % decrease in impervious, you can go up 1 foot vertically.
Okay. So there's a benefit to long-term to doing this, because over the long haul on this campus, then you would have less impervious coverage. We had discussions with all the consultants and the township staff, and in particular the fire marshal. One thing that was a big difference here was an agreement. The old building 5 did not have a full driveway all around it. So we ended up with discussions to improve fire safety. now provide a full driveway around that. Zach, if you could just kind of point that out. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but that driveway there was now added. So that's a really
Uh-oh.
Did anyone
Hey,
else having
Greg.
trouble hearing Greg?
Yeah, we
Greg,
lost
No
him.
we
sound.
lost your audio.
Sounds
Well, I
like he
can-
lost his
I
too
can-
because he's still talking. Hey, Greg, can you hear us?
Greg, we
Coming
lost
into
your
a
audio.
site, we would do that. We made, Chris Williams' team had us upgrade it to some standards, so we made some minor changes there.
Hey, Greg.
One other key change was out on Moores. We did not have sidewalk along the frontage. There's a trail, so many of you may know, there's a trail that weaves through the campus, and it's kind of used by the public. The school cross-country team and other things like use it. And so when we did it in 16, excuse me, the trail stayed inside the property. And after discussion with township staff, they encouraged us to look at the option of putting it out there along the road. And we agree. We thought that was a good idea. So, sorry, Deb. Let me see here.
Greg, we can hear you now. We lost about 30 seconds or
Can you hear
so
me
of
now?
audio.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you
Sorry
for like
about
the
that.
last 10 seconds.
So I don't know what happened to my headphones. So we talked about the driveway around the building. Other than that, the plan is pretty much the same. We did make one change. There's a path going through the property that lots of people use. It's kind of a general public people use it. The school cross-country team uses it. But that path was inside the property out on Moores Road, and we've switched that over to outside. So it's now right along Moores Road. The staff has asked us to shift it over a little closer to the street so that we save the buffer along there. So that we're going to make that change. That's the little detail we'll clean up. One item I did want to clarify, and you might have seen it in some of the review letters. There's some confusion, and candidly, I'm not sure it was on the old plan. I don't know why, about some removal of trees along Moores Road. That won't occur. Was never our intention to do that. So most people, if they know this campus, know there's a very heavy buffer along Moores Road, and we will keep that. The difference being is now the sidewalk will be allowed along the street so the public can use that more conveniently. Other than that, that's pretty much the plan. Just as a general statement, the town has a wonderful master plan for trails and paths throughout the township. There is hope for a path along Mill and Sidley going up on the moor. So yeah, thank you, Zach. Running up along that stretch in that area, where the applicant is very happy to work as far as providing an easement. Our project doesn't extend over to there, but we're certainly willing to help with them, and their township's going to get back to us on location and information. But we just wanted to share that we're clearly in a cooperative effort to show that. So just note that may pop up in the review letter, and that's what we're doing. Lou talked about the improvements to the intersection of Sidley and Phoenixville Pike, and the two traffic consultants are working on that. So overall, it's really not much different from 16, but what changes we did make, we think are an improvement, and you get down to just one building. So
I have a question.
that's the pretty quick summary.
Greg, can you hear me? Now my
I'll take any
audio's
questions.
not working right.
Yeah, Greg, it sounds like Greg may not be able to hear us. Greg, are you able to hear us when we talk?
Sorry, now I have my volume up.
So Greg, you can hear us now?
Zach, can you hear me?
I can. I seem to only be having trouble. Well, I'm just not sure if Greg can hear us at this point. Everything else seems to be working okay. For now.
Greg, can you hear me? Nah, he can't hear.
Ask the question, Jeff. Maybe I know the, maybe I know.
Yeah.
the
Okay,
answer.
that's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah,
Is
or maybe-
the elevation
Ooh.
of the new plan, the first floor elevation, the same as what was on the older plan, or maybe you got it to go a little lower? Because I know we're going up one story.
You did have to ask that question, didn't you?
Yeah, that's a Greg question.
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. It looks like the buildings are in the same location, or this building is in the generally same location as one of the other ones was. But
Yeah.
Greg, are you hearing any of this?
I typed a message to him privately.
Okay.
I sent a similar message just now to everybody, but
Does anybody have a, hey, why don't you punch up the rendering of the building? You know, do you have that? And maybe the trail plan, we can speak to that while it doesn't require engineering expertise.
yeah, we'll let Greg weigh in on the other aspect. My understanding is that from a grading standpoint, everything is very similar, if not exactly the same. So it would be a similar first floor elevation. But we'll let him confirm that, of course.
Do you have those renderings, Zach?
Yeah, I am working on that. 1 second. So there's 2 of them here. I'll pull up the first one, which is more of a ground level.
Okay. And I can let, to the extent that there's questions about the building, Craig can answer that as the owner's rep. You've heard this before. You've heard it from other clients of ours. Of course, any building being built now is being totally post-COVID specifications, clean buildings, green buildings. The marketplace is demanding that for all new construction. So we're not into that level of detail yet, but that is a significant change over what was being proposed just a year ago. And I think the client has already built a couple, or is in the process of building a couple of these types of buildings. But it's really going to be one of the reasons that we think there's going to be a demand for new office space, which we haven't seen, is just because of the post-COVID requirements. A lot of the existing product cannot be economically retrofitted to meet what today's tenants are asking for or requiring.
All right, Jeff, I think you were asking me something. I can't wait till we meet in person again, but that's a story for me.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I couldn't hear anything. But anyway, sorry about that, Jeff.
Okay, the question was the first floor elevation the same as the old plans or probably darn close?
Pretty close to it. There's a little bit of there's a different shape and orientation, but I think, Jeff, it's slightly bigger, but not much.
Well, I'm looking at like the elevation off ground level. I know that the building, of course, got another story tall. I was just wondering if it started at the same point, or if there was any opportunity for it to be a hair lower so it didn't stand out so much.
We did not change the grading much. There are lots of dynamics tied to my stormwater management because I had to really work around. We are doing infiltration, even though there's clearly carciology in the general areas, but we did testing and found some good spots, and that kind of drives a lot of what we're doing.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Could you re-explain the changes to the paths?
So out on, maybe, Zach, could you zoom in just a little bit more out on Moores Road for me, please? So originally the path that, we had a path that went in between the tree buffer and the basins. So Zach, maybe you could kind of there, right in that area. That's where the path was in the previous approval. And it was a discussion when the staff, because the township's moving to this comprehensive trail plan and things have changed since 16 along that lines, it was like, is there any way that we can move that path out to the street? And so we work with them. We're kind of jogging around some utility poles and some other stuff related to utilities and a manhole and some trees, but we believe we could kind of weave that around along the street frontage. So that was the shift to the.
So it was a request on our part to move the path.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what's shown here along Moores Road, at least in this section, is a sidewalk.
Right.
There's some existing, let's say, mulch trails throughout. There's some sort of on-road, like striped shoulders throughout the drive aisles and parking areas, I think, through this area.
Mm-hmm.
which of course shows as being under construction, and then some mulch trails on the eastern side of the site.
So, John here, Zach, I have a question. When you made that request, was that out of a mind that this made that sidewalk appear more of the public domain where people could access it as opposed to something behind the trees that was not visible?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my personal perspective on it, there's benefit to each, right? But if the long-term plan is to try to build out a sidewalk network, then it does make sense to try to get it out towards the road. It seemed like there was space for it, which there isn't always. And something that Greg and I talked about briefly is that ultimately this would actually extend down towards the Gunkel Mill site, which the township has been working, in years past has renovated and recently working on getting a wheel on the side with the historical commission. So long term, I think the idea is to help get people down to that site more easily and make it more open to the public. So that this does help in that regard as well.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I assumed that was the motive, but I wanted to hear it.
Any other questions? So will you be back when with?
My guess, Deb, is probably not in May because we're almost to the end of the month now. We've got to revise the plans and resubmit them. So my guess is the June Planning Commission meeting. And we'd probably be looking for a recommendation at that time. As you can see from the review letters, the cleanup items are not significant. We will be more prepared, obviously, to talk about traffic improvements at that time. That's going to be a collaborative effort between Chris and our traffic guys over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So my guess would be your June meeting.
Okay, Lou, can you just circle back on the Sidley Road improvements there? How is this project tied to that again? Can you just rehash?
Well, when we got the original plan approved, this goes back, I'm going to give you more detail than you'll want, but I'll make it quick. Way back on one of the 1990 or 2000 iterations of the Aegon redevelopment, before PennDOT came along and improved Route 401, and before we have those improvements installed, one of the obligations of this client or of this property owner back then was to do improvements down at 401 and to expand that area. Well, PennDOT came along and did it and did a nice job of it. So when we came in with the 2 building plan, the township decided to revisit that, obviously, because it didn't have to be done anymore. And they said, well, we could really use an off-site improvement at Sidley and Phoenixville, because apparently that intersection doesn't work real well. And there was a scheme that was come up with at that time that we had volunteered to implement. Okay, so that's part of the 2 building plan approval. Well, after that plan got approved, the township then enacted an Act 209 ordinance, which for off-site improvements, an applicant can either make a contribution, which in this case, I don't know, probably be about $500,000. I haven't done the math. Or, you can do the offset improvements. So what we're trying to do now is figure out whether there's a scheme out there at Sidley and Phoenixville that we could do in lieu of paying that traffic improvement fee, or does it just make more sense for us to pay the fee and maybe the township matches that money with Charlestown, or to do some more expansive improvement at that intersection. That's beyond my pay grade, but I think the preference right now is that there be a set of improvements that this applicant could afford to do in lieu of that traffic improvement fee. So that's the discussion that'll take place over the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Are the proposed improvements part of the 209 study?
I think by and large, Joe, I can't say verbatim everything is part of it, but it's darn close. Yeah, I think it is in the district, and I think the improvements are called out in that 209 study. Now, I think Charlestown may have
You're correct, Lou.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, you're correct, Lou. They are in the Act 209 study. They are in the service area.
I think the stuff Charlestown wanted obviously would not have been in your 209 study, would it, Chris? I mean, was that over and above?
The intersection's not even in Charlestown Township. It's actually entirely within East Whiteland.
That's interesting.
The
It
grant
is.
application that we pursued did have an additional turn lane and some other slight differences over what's called out in the 209 study, but the basis of that, again, additional turn lane, some limited widening, potentially some signal improvements, are all kind of factored into that original project.
Yeah, but the improvements that we'd be asking, or that this group is looking to implement, would be consistent with our 209 study.
Thanks.
The other thing I'll jump in with, we don't have to run through the waivers. Obviously, that'll probably change by the time they come back with their next set of plans. Is there's a request for combined preliminary final. So I'd like to get at least the planning commission's temperature on that. This is a plan that was mostly engineered, I'd say, before, but kind of want to at least get the input so we know how to proceed, and the board has the planning commission's sort of opinion on that, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I think I have an issue with that, unfortunately. To grant preliminary final is a waiver, and there's a recent case that came down specifically on this topic that's saying you have to have a certain level of hardship to prove that you waive that provision in your ordinance. If there were no protestants involved in this matter, I would be less inclined to object to it. But I think there may be a protestant. So I think the applicant is exposing himself to an appeal that would have merit.
Yeah, we have no objection. It's not that, frankly, I don't think it's that important, big a deal to us. If it's going to go preliminary and final, that's fine. I'm starting to think that it takes the same amount of time at the end of the day anyway. So I agree with you, Joe. I mean, if it, we'll probably just drop that waiver request.
Okay, so that's it for you guys.
I have a question.
Yeah, we do have at least one comment for public comment, so we can start with those that are present and then check the
Sure.
email. So Martin, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to express a concern and a change from the prior plan to the current plan. One of the, and again, I'm expressing this from my perspective as an adjacent resident. I am directly east of this site, across Mill Lane. My concern is this: the change from the prior plan is that on the south side, just south of the existing building 2, there has been added what's called a rain garden. I assume that's some type of storm water management facility. In reviewing the plans, I noticed that some 25 to 30 mature trees will be removed in creating the parking lot and that rain garden at that location. So my concern is this: previously, with all those mature trees there, the visibility of that parking lot was not of particular concern. However, with the removal of those trees now, primarily for the installation of that rain garden, I'm concerned as to the visibility, the landscaping, specifically at the end or on the east end of that new parking lot. Yeah, right there, Zach. The plans call for tulip poplar trees to be planted there at the end of the parking lot on its eastern end. I'm not sure that's the best tree. That's a deciduous tree. Keep in mind that my property sits almost 100 feet above the elevation of that parking lot there. According to Chesco Views, the elevation of the parking lot at that location's about 320 feet. My house sits at 410 feet elevation. And in between my house, even though it's some distance, my house and the eastern end of that parking lot, the property just east of that rain garden, dips down another 30 feet for the Valley Creek watershed. So simply put, because of this change, I'm concerned about the visibility of this parking lot from my home, caused by the removal of all those mature trees. So my question is, can we come up with some type of better tree that would provide year-round screening on the eastern end of that parking lot?
Greg, are those the trees that you were talking about earlier that or
No, they're not, Lou. And I'd have
Okay.
to look at the plan in detail. I actually thought there was a rain garden there before. I didn't think we were changing that rain garden, to be honest with you.
I didn't see it on the prior plan, but regardless, I'm going back, looking at the, trying to find it anyway. I know, Zach, you may be better at this.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look at the trees that we're putting along that transition area between the end of the parking where the rain garden is, but that rain garden was there before. So
what was your, Marty, what was your recommendation for trees? Or maybe you're asking us for one other than, you don't like the tulip poplars?
Well, tulip poplar, Lou, they're deciduous. To me, they're not the strongest tree for, in terms of storm damage, et cetera.
Right.
My suggestion would be possibly evergreen trees and possibly a few more along that eastern end.
I'd be happy, Mr. Lutz, to talk to the township landscape architect, to talk with him about what we can do to address that. That we can work something out.
Okay, great. If you keep me in the loop, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, we will. We'll make sure to do that. I'll work with Zach to keep you in the loop.
Thanks, Greg.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
You got it.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, any other questions, Zach? Anybody else coming in with comments?
This is Brian Brook. I had a question. You had said before that at the top of this that we were going to limit the discussion to just the site plan. Is now an appropriate time for off-site road improvements other than the 29? Should we revisit that later, or is now the right time?
I don't know that we are doing any other off-site road improvements other than, and Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the off-site road package improvement was Sidley and 29. I'm not aware of any others. Are there, Greg?
We're not doing anything. We're doing right in front of our site there on Moore, but we're not doing any others. And again, the dynamics have changed now because of the Township's Act 209 study. Technically, that's a payment, and then the township works that into their program. Whether they use that funds for a different intersection, that I don't know that, and Chris may be able to address that. But we certainly have had no discussions about improvements anywhere else.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. The previous road improvements that we were talking about earlier are at Sidley and Phoenixville Pike. That is something that we're working through to see if there's a way that project could be implemented as part of this rather than paying the fee. But to Lou and Greg's points, there are no other offsite improvements. But Brian, if those are the ones that you're referring to, we can either talk about it or wait till we have a more updated plan. But if you have a specific concern, it may not hurt to at least hear it at this meeting.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it sounds like this plan was approved back in 2016. So I think things have definitely changed since then, specifically the traffic patterns and where people are going at various points of the day. I think if, as they leave this campus and head north through Sidley, there are traffic abatement things that there's speed limits as that rolls through an R1 density area. But I think what we're seeing now is traffic is moving from that campus eastward down at I guess that's the southwestern portion of the campus. They're just going up another point out, which is all R1 homes. And that road really narrows at Wilburdale and Lap. And so I guess my point was, if there was a traffic study done back in 2016, I think the assumptions thereof have changed drastically. And I would ask the Planning Commission to also look at traffic improvements or abatement that would be needed on the other way out of that campus, which is that the Sidley Mill and the Lap Road intersection.
Can somebody please silence their phone?
You know, I did want to point out, and I kind of lost in the shuffle because we just lost second. Another benefit to this plan, candidly, is we're reducing the square footage, you know, from 197.5 down to 175. And it's a little wide open. Chris may want to comment. We don't even know where the trends are going with how much you're working at home and, you know, on a daily basis. I think you're going to end up with some combination, but you actually may end up with less traffic in the future out of offices than before. But Chris, you can be the soothsayer, so to speak, and figure that out.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot that's a lot of change on the horizon, I think, as it relates to traffic generation for office developments. I mean, all of us are sitting at home right now, and you know, we do anticipate changes going forward, and it's yet to be determined as to how that all shakes out and what happens in the future with added traffic from this project or any of the existing office facilities in this area. But it was stated earlier, so this project is, you know, the earlier project was approved and studies were done for that project. Comprehensive studies were done for that project. And at the end of the day, it was ultimately determined that the need is to improve traffic conditions at Sidley Road and Phoenixville Pike. That is a congestion point, and that's something that we do want to try to address. And that has been agreed to. So now fast forward to today, this is a brand new application. Technically, the applicant has no obligation or responsibility for off-site traffic improvements. Their obligation is really just to pay their traffic impact fee. And then it would be up to the township to use that money for traffic improvements in the area. However, we're fortunate to have an applicant that's willing to work with the township and help the township meet its goals towards that original commitment for traffic improvement. So we are trying to work out a plan whereby this developer, maybe partnering with the township, we can still get to a point where we can implement needed traffic improvements to address the congestion at Phoenixville Pike and Sidley Road. And the logic being, let's try to improve traffic conditions along sort of the main roads. And, you know, the more we can improve traffic on the major roadways in the area, hopefully there's a benefit there in minimizing impact through some of the more local roads and the neighborhood streets. So, you know, this development will have a less impact than the development did several years ago that was approved. It's a smaller development, smaller square footage, which is going to result in less traffic. Yet we still have the same commitment at this time for the same package of improvements, which is great. That's really where we are right now. Right now, we're focusing our efforts with this developer to make improvements at the intersection of Phoenixville Pike and Sidley Road. If there is a separate concern about neighborhood cut-through traffic at Wilburdale and Laff Road and some of those more neighborhood areas, you know, really that's probably, and I'd hate to say it, and I work for the township, and they're probably not going to appreciate me saying this, but that's probably as much a township issue as anything. I mean, that's probably something that we could examine separately. I'm not sure what this one developer could do to address that concern. So maybe there's a need for a separate conversation. The township has a traffic committee, and maybe we could get more information about the concern and bring it to a traffic committee meeting, try to better understand the concern, and then determine whether or not there's a solution that the township can help with, or maybe once we understand the problem, you know, we could bring it back to this developer and see if there's an easy solution that this developer could also contribute to. You know, I'm not going to make any commitments until we have a better understanding as to what the problem is. So I would suggest a conversation outside of this meeting during the daytime. Maybe we set up a phone call, and then maybe we can discuss it at one of our monthly traffic committee meetings. So long answer, but hopefully that provides maybe some path forward.
Okay, Chris, thanks. Yeah, that does answer my question. I'll try to address that to the traffic committee. And it is essentially the traffic as well as the speeding. I know the township police have had to have several markings, or I don't know if there's active enforcement, but we definitely have trail behind, speed limit markers, as well as a permanent flashing speed limit marker coming out of that campus. It's been a recurring problem. So maybe I'll bring that to the traffic committee for some help there.
Yeah, so it sounds like the condition you're talking about is a condition that exists today. It's really independent of this project. Obviously, actually where this project is located, I'm not sure to what degree this project is going to significantly add to that condition. It might be the other existing portions of St. Cobain that are maybe causing that. But yeah, I would say reach out to the township staff during the day, and we can get it on a traffic committee agenda and try to understand it better and see if there's a way we can find a solution.
Thank you.
Okay, Zach, I'm assuming you have that gentleman's information that you can communicate with him when the traffic committee meets.
Yes, I do. And Brian, feel free to reach out to me with your concerns. I can kind of distribute them then to the rest of the committee.
All right, we'll do, Zach. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions for the 20 Moores Road project? Are we good?
We're good. I don't see any hands raised, and we don't have any questions or comments in our email.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Yep, thanks very much. Have a great night. We appreciate your
You
time.
too. See you
Thank
next
you,
time.
everyone.
Thanks.
Appreciate the time. Thanks.
Okay, the next applicant is for the Commons at Great Valley, Lot 15, parking lot expansion. 1303 Wrights Lane Associates LP, land development application to construct a parking lot containing 28 spaces on Lot 15 of the Commons at Great Valley, which is on the south side of the General Warren Boulevard. The proposed lot serves as additional parking for the village at General Warren Commercial Center on the north side of General Warren Boulevard. The property located at 83 General Warren Boulevard is located within the OBP, Office Business Park District. Who's here for?
You got me for this one too, Deb.
Okay.
And I think we also have Adam Lowe. Do I see Tim Towns on this phone call?
Yep.
Okay. So Adam, myself, and Tim we don't have our civil engineer is not available this evening, but again, just like the prior application that you just heard, this is more of an overview of where this project is and where it will be headed going forward. It's hardly the most complicated project any of us have ever seen. It's a 28-car parking lot. In some townships, that wouldn't even constitute land development, but that's my editorial comment for the evening. We've submitted a land development application, and it's going through the review process. We've got the review letters, and I think rather than take everybody's time, obviously the parking is going to be to facilitate the overflow that's going on in the commercial portion of this section of both Charlestown and East Whiteland. Pre-COVID, a very successful commercial development. Post-COVID, it's going to be an even more successful commercial development. So we've submitted plans for the parking lot. We already revised them once based on review letters we got, I guess, a couple of months ago. They went back in, and there's really a couple of comments I think that our client wanted to, and the staff, I think, wanted to raise with the Planning Commission tonight, recognizing this whole issue of connectivity. It's a a front and center issue, as it should be in East Whiteland with the redevelopment of these various areas. This site, if somebody could punch up the site plan, we could probably speak to it more intelligently. Zach? And Adam, you can jump in, or Tim, you can jump in. I'll tee it up and you guys can, carry forward with the technical explanation.
Lou, would you like me to bring up an aerial first just to orient? Or
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Why don't you do that, Zach?
Let's go with this one. Everyone able to see my screen?
Nice. Good. Okay. You can see General Warren Boulevard. You can see the commercial establishment up there in Charlestown. And you can see the Lot 15 portion in East Whiteland, which is on the other side of General Warren Boulevard. And Zach is showing you with his cursor the proximate area of where that 28-car parking lot would be. There'd be a mid-block crossing, pedestrian crossing right there to get into the facility. The township ordinance, as you folks know all too well, would require sidewalk frontage along General Warren Boulevard for that portion of the site in Charles or in East Whiteland Township. This is where I'll step back. I'm not an expert in sidewalks or pedestrian connectivity, but I understand that our consultants have been in conversation with Chris and Zach about, maybe that's not the smartest place to have a sidewalk. Not quite sure who it would serve or what it would serve. And, maybe it makes more sense to approach the township, which is what we did, and to see what the general circulation plans that the township has for that area are. And maybe we make a contribution to be applied to a more practical pedestrian connectivity plan rather than simply following the ordinance and placing the sidewalk along the General Warren Boulevard frontage. But that's the one planning. I'm not quite sure there are any other planning issues unless I missed them. Again, technical stuff that has to be cleaned up, but nothing in any of the review letters that caused us any concern. So with that, maybe we go back to the site plan. Zach, maybe this is a better plan to talk about the pedestrian connectivity. I'll leave that up to you.
Sure, yeah. I guess the only thing I would add relative to the sidewalk specifically, and then we can talk about maybe what the plan is long-term. As you can see along here, this is a landscape berm. It's a pretty mature landscape berm. There's some areas where it would get a little tighter than others. So the sidewalk would not, as much as that's certainly not the most complicated sidewalk retrofit that we've come across in the last year or so, but it's not also a slam dunk easy sidewalk installation, I don't think, just given some what it would take to fit it in. So I think so in addition to that comment, I guess I can flip to a different plan unless anybody has a specific comment or question relative to just that aspect of the sidewalk.
I mean, I'll just make a comment. I tend to agree that a sidewalk doesn't make sense there. So.
Yeah, let me pull up a plan that would just help a little bit. This is from the DeVault trail study that was commissioned by some of our neighbors. And I think I can just quickly show you what I think a better long-term plan is. So this is the site. Is everyone able to see this plan with the yellow lines on it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this wooded lot is now the Commons at Great Valley, or the Village of General Warren. The project site is here. There's now a sidewalk that goes essentially all around this corner of the site. This is the commercial portion of Atwater, so Atwater North with the slip ramp, etc. I think the long-term plan as part of sort of Atwater's development in the Patriots Path in years past was to connect this trail along Atwater Drive along the south side, which is primarily in place already, and then extend it out to 29 under the slip ramp and cross on the south side of this intersection, and then across this entrance here to head north and ultimately connect into an existing rail line that runs all the way to Phoenixville through Charlestown. So although that plan is rather ambitious and there's nobody that's specifically running with that yet, there's a group that's meeting now to explore that, the implementation of that plan, that is. Ultimately, the idea is to try to get people essentially from this immediate area, this commercial area, into Atwater, and then ultimately to points further north and south and east. So this is an important connection, but one that's not easily implemented, I don't think, by this application necessarily.
Yeah, could you call up the Google Maps, maybe
Sure.
Street View? I think that might help people that may be
Sure.
unfamiliar.
That might take me just a minute, but
I
cool.
have it up. I can share my screen.
Let's see how quick
No,
I can do it.
can I?
You could, but then I'd have to give you control, and then
Control.
I think
You can pull it up quickly enough. You'll see there's a berm there.
Yeah.
There's a sidewalk already on the other side of the street. Yeah.
Yep. So here is, I'm just south of the intersection, so let me just pull up. Here, right now, I'm right at the intersection of Atwater, General Warren, and 29. 29 is, this is 29 North, the office bars up there, and this is the development that we're referring to. So there's a sidewalk along here already. what the plan would call, if we just implemented the ordinance, it would be a sidewalk along here, which you can see is, it's not that it's impossible to build it, but it would potentially disrupt some of this landscaping. What we had talked about with the applicant was potentially doing something more of a crosswalk out along here, but even that, as simple as that sounds, from a permitting and a construction and a retrofit standpoint, is not also very simple either. So that's just sort of the background. Happy to kind of drive around if anybody needs to look at it.
Might as well drive up the road.
Drive up the road? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's just go up the road.
It's a nice day. We got the windows down. So this is the entrance to the existing commercial area, and then this is generally where the parking lot would be. The grading would clip the end of this berm and go just into the edge of this basin here. So this is the site.
The cutout's already there on the curb.
Can anybody explain why that cutout's already there? Access to the maintenance for the basin?
Yeah, it's there as a access point to maintain the basin.
Okay.
Zach, I think it's the proposal to put a crosswalk at the entrance of that parking lot into where the PJs is?
Yeah, essentially it would come across, this is approximate, but across right here, mid-block at grade, and then tie into this existing sidewalk. So we'd provide some comments just about sight lines and things like that, but those I think are relatively easily addressed.
I got a question. Is where the proposed parking's going is part of the common area of the whole development?
No, it's just part of that lot 15 lot area. This is not part of common area for the development. Although I will tell you this, Jeff, the storm, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the stormwater management facilities on this site do handle other properties. Am I mistaken on that, or was
Yeah,
it just...
it's like a it's a common facility on lot 15.
The stormwater management?
Basin. Yes, the stormwater
Okay.
basin.
Yeah,
There's two
stormwater
basins.
basin.
This is one of them. Yep.
This is a preliminary plan, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's consistent with the conversation we just had. We don't have any problem breaking it up to preliminary and final. In fact, if the planning commission were inclined, we would take a recommendation for preliminary and come back to you with all the details on final. It's just not that complicated an application, to be honest with you. It's a parking lot.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. But is there anybody in the planning commission that has any other comments on this or more input?
No, I don't. I think it's a good plan that solves the problem you got.
It's definitely needed, I can tell you, because I'm right next door to there and I'm in there all the time at PJ's and the nail salon and all that. The parking, they need the extra parking.
It almost seems to me like somebody's already using it for that. I mean, how does it get that worn? They're not doing that much maintenance on that.
You're right.
That's all the ATVs that go cut through that property after hours and to the railroad line.
Oh my.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adam, you didn't know about that?
No. Yeah, no.
I got a question. It's more out of curiosity. If parking was never needed here or never foreseen to be needed in the future, what could have or would have went here on this lot 15?
It has a two-story office building that's back behind the pond. This is just an additional thumb that was part of the property. It's a long piece that's basically additional green space.
Got it. Would that basin handle the stormwater?
No, we
you
do
haven't
our own
gotten it.
stormwater for the new parking lot.
Okay. I mean, it's relatively speaking, it's a small footprint.
Right.
Yeah.
However, we got to meet the new BMP requirements with the state and conservation district, and an above ground basin doesn't cut it anymore.
Uh-huh.
So if that parking lot's then is there for overflow of the existing shopping center, can there, and we're not going to put that sidewalk in, which I agree is not needed. Can there be like a more robust crosswalk there? I'm just thinking at nighttime, it is pretty dark, for people leaving like PJs and stuff.
Yeah.
And if people are walking across.
Yeah, our intent for that parking lot is primarily for employees of the center, which would include hotel and PJs are the big employers. So we don't see it as retail traffic. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be larger, just we don't anticipate it's back and forth of traffic. We'll probably sign it for employees or overflow parking to the extent that the parking lot next door is at capacity.
And Adam, Charlestown had recommended that we provide some additional lighting out there to light it.
And so has Chris Williams. I think part of Chris's reviews were he wanted to see, he recommended over our first application, he did recommend sort of a beefing up of that crossing, which we've implemented, and I'm sure he'll be on top of that as we submit the final plan.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking for a substantial crossing with signage, that sort of thing. And I will tell you that they've already agreed to make some improvements out there to improve and address sight distance to make sure that we have clear lines of sight. So given the usage for employees, it'll be fairly low turnover. As long as there's adequate sight distance and well marked, I think it'll be fine.
And my point was that these are going to be people that are familiar with that crossing. They're going to be using it on a daily basis, that work 5, 6 days a week.
Can you give us just a brief update on where, as I understand it, there's a similar parking expansion project that's kind of working its way through the preliminary review process in Charlestown to add some parking actually contiguous to the site. Is that something you can give us just a brief update on?
Sure. So we are in the process of requesting a variance with zoning hearing board. We have our next meeting in May, the follow-up. The challenge to additional parking on lot is impervious coverage. So we are at the max. We can kind of pop in a couple of slots, but you just can't make a nice effective parking field, particularly with drive aisles. So we, at the recommendation of the DRC, they'd prefer a consolidated, larger parking area than a scatter shot throughout that met impervious coverage. So we went up, had our first meeting, which I think was well received. But again, we've got certain thresholds to clear in demonstrating why that's necessary. But it's 37 additional spaces net. We kind of reorganized that area down there in that lower portion. You got your cursor on it.
So I think the township boundary runs right through here, right? So at some point when you've got some better clarity on where that project is going, it'll probably be a joint application with the two townships, right? So we can work on that obviously when the time comes, but I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware there's two projects, and it seems like the two will work well together, just given at least what I've seen on the basic site plan for Charlestown and what we see on our end so far.
So John Lawmer here with a kind of a little bit bigger picture question that does relate to this, which is, this is a busy area now with the off-ramp from the expressway. So is the need for parking principally, say, noon hour or midday, or is it really all day long where they need this added parking collectively?
John, let me see if I can speak to that. It's going to vary as new uses come into the retail. Right now, we have 6,800 square feet that is not occupied. We have a dance studio, which will be up and running, I think in July. That may change the dynamic a little bit. They're more drop-off oriented. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the bulk of it, what is it doing now, or what was it doing pre-COVID? It's the 4 to 6 hour where we see peak loads in this parking lot. Those would be the hotel guests returning from their evening and guests coming to PJ's for an after dinner bev or after work beverage.
All right, that does answer my question. For the long term, who knows, we may need even more parking. Is that doable on this space circumscribed by all these roads?
It would require additional variance and again, going back to Charlestown Township for that request.
So for right now, looking at the tea leaves of after the COVID pandemic, this may be what you need.
You know, I think we're overbuilding at the moment. I say overbuilding, meaning, you know, I think we'll get there, but we want to avoid the situation we had probably 3 years ago when the Eagles were in the playoffs and that wing night at PJ's was a hit. So, you know, goal is to make sure we cover it. I think it will. You know, I've been in that parking lot at 5:30 measuring what's going on, and after 6 it loosens up. So it's just a really short timeline. And I hope that just a little gasket of 40 spaces, 60 spaces, if we add the others across the street roughly, will cover us.
Right. That, you know, it's interesting because I live near the Lincoln Court Shopping Center over by Route 30 in Malin, and there are times there now where you can't get a parking spot for several hours and then it just empties out.
Yeah, restaurants are the driver there. Lincoln Court's full of them. So, you know, they've got more restaurants than I think the food court at the mall used to have. But this is really a one restaurant center. We can have an additional restaurant that operates at different hours, but PJ's was pretty adamant about, you know, containing that potential traffic which might compete for parking.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we might have a pizza shop.
Yeah, this makes good sense. Thank you for explaining.
No problem.
Anyone else? Zach, do we have anybody in the waiting room or in the chat room wanting to ask questions or?
I don't see anyone.
No, I don't see any hands either, and nothing in email comment either.
Is everybody comfortable with recommending preliminary approval?
The only thing I would just chime in, sorry to do that here. Daryl does have some stormwater comments. We met with Adam Brower earlier to kind of walk through that.
Okay.
So there are some stormwater. I think they're addressable, but they're ones that in theory could have some ripple effects. So I'd want to hear Daryl's thoughts on that. The only other real aspect that is worth mentioning, I would think, is technically under the current steep slopes ordinance, the albeit very minimal disturbance to the toe of the berm and the edge of the stormwater basin would trigger our ordinance, unfortunately. So I think one thing we talked about with Adam and Lou, I know we've talked at least, you know, on how that ordinance would impact some of the current projects that we're seeing. I mean, technically, without either conditional use or variance relief, it wouldn't comply with the zoning at current. If that ordinance were to move forward, I think those issues more or less go away. So there's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of moment here. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Yeah, and I would expect that Zach is 100% right. In fact, you know, we should have brought this up with the Moores Road application as well. We're not going to be asking for final approval for either one of these plans unless and until the township steep slope ordinance gets amended, because if it doesn't, believe it or not, we would have to seek a variance to disturb a stormwater basin because that's now considered a steep slope in your township. But I think the township's going to do away with that over the next 60 days. So any recommendation for preliminary plan approval would be contingent on either us getting slope relief or the township amending the ordinance such that it wasn't needed. But yeah, we are intentionally not going to seek a final plan approval until we know what direction that slope ordinance is headed. It's just, I think this application is the poster boy for why the current steep slope ordinance doesn't work and why the township is actually going to fix that.
Regarding the stormwater comments that Zach mentioned, there's 7 technical comments under stormwater. Based on our conversation today with Adam Brower, Once he provides the revised plan, he's going to show some spout elevation, some additional contouring. The majority of those comments go away. They're no longer applicable. So I do not have a problem with preliminary plan approval or recommendation at this time.
So I guess the question really is as much for Joe relative to that steep slopes. Again, it's maybe more of a procedural question than anything.
I have no issue with the planning commission doing a recommendation, but I'm not going to want the board of supervisors to grant an approval when there's outstanding zoning relief that's necessary. But for the purposes of this meeting tonight, I have no issue with the recommendation.
That's fine. That's consistent with what we were thinking.
We make the recommendation pending, do we have to state pending the ordinance change for steep slopes? I mean,
We're getting zoning relief.
Yeah, pending resolution of the steep slopes issue. Yeah, something to that effect.
okay. Anybody on the board have an issue with that? I'm good with it.
No, I mean, what does the applicant think about that? I mean, does it even make any sense to do it now? I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt at all. And what about the sidewalk? Are we like, technically speaking, the sidewalk, until we grant some kind of waiver, you have to put the sidewalk in on the one side. So that, when is that going to be addressed, or would it be addressed in what we're about to do, a preliminary final?
Well, I think remember, we decided to break it down. It's just going to be preliminary, and then the final would clean up those details. My guess would be that your recommendation, if you're inclined to make one, would be contingent on either getting zoning relief for the steep slope or waiting till the township amends the ordinance, and working out, I think the planning commission I heard was in favor of a waiver of the sidewalk along General Warren Boulevard, but working with the township to facilitate eventually a connection across General Warren Boulevard to connect both sides of the property. So that detail would be worked out before the supervisors. They may decide not to grant the waiver. All you folks have to do is determine whether you want to make the recommendation.
I would like to make the recommendation. To me, it makes sense. And that sidewalk goes nowhere. I think the sidewalk on the opposite side of General Warren Boulevard is absolutely ridiculous, but that's me.
Well, I agree. I totally agree. I just, the sequence of events here, it's like they haven't put in any kind of waiver asking for it. It's just been a discussion point.
Right.
I don't see any waiver. We can create the waiver right off the bat, I guess, right? That we would recommend a waiver on that.
Yeah, we would officially, I mean, if the planning commission, we wanted to have the conversation tonight because we didn't know what the opinion would be. We didn't even think about the waiver. We were prepared to install the sidewalk, but we were also then educated to the broader issue here. So yeah, I would, before the supervisors see it, which according to Joe, probably won't be until his steep slope ordinance is taken care of. We just wanted the planning commission to weigh in, and we will not show a sidewalk if the planning commission's recommendation is that the board grant a waiver. If you were to say tonight, we don't recommend granting that waiver, then we'd probably pause and we'd stop everything until, we got feedback from the supervisor.
Well, I recommend granting a waiver for the sidewalk not to be placed, but a quality crosswalk to go in, which we don't have the details, but that could be hammered out later.
Yeah.
And so, I'm okay with this plan. I'm just wondering how to word it and the timing. It's like, why wouldn't we bother just waiting until the new ordinances go into place, or?
It has to do with the meeting site, and it might sound minuscule, but you end up it being a 30 to 60 day additional wait to the cycle. So if we can knock out these meetings one at a time and not have to come back to the planning commission for a recommendation later in June, which puts us behind schedule. I think Adam wants to start this project this summer. So if this were a next year, a 2022 project, I'd agree with you, Jeff. We would just bag it. But we're counting days here. We're counting, months. So it has to do with the meetings. So.
Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to hear. I mean, I'll make a recommendation, but it's going to be hard to remember exactly how to word this. For what are we looking for? Preliminary approval?
Yeah.
Of the parking lot expansion of 28 spaces on lot 15 at the Commons at Great Valley, which is lot 15 parking lot expansion. Contingent upon, and again, somebody can help me with this, the future zoning ordinances regarding the steep slopes that the man-made conditions will be waived. Waive might not be the right word, but and also we recommend a waiver for the sidewalk on the south side of General Warren Boulevard. So who's going to help me word that right?
That sounded pretty good.
Okay.
Why don't we make it just pending resolution of the steep
That's
slopes?
pretty good, Jeff.
That sounded odd with I understand we're going to waive the sidewalk. That's pretty concrete, but the steep slopes is still up for discussion, and we don't know where that's going to go exactly.
I would say, why don't you just say what Jack said earlier? It would be contingent also on either the applicant obtaining zoning relief for the steep slope disturbance.
The man-made steep slopes.
That
sounds
better. Thank you.
Okay, well, I said man-made. So,
yeah.
So that sounds good to me. What Zach says, and just insert the word man-made, and I think we got it done, right? Zach, can you put that into words for me and we're done?
Sure. Yeah, I would just make it something simple, like pending resolution of the man-made steep slopes issue called out in the review letters, and in support of the waiver of the sidewalk on the south side of General Warren Boulevard, and contingent upon review letters, the standard.
Right, the standard contingent upon the review letters. Okay, so that's my recommendation.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Todd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good night.
All right.
All right. Take care.
So we technically have another public comment period. I don't know if there's anything
Anybody in it?
related to not on the agenda. I have one thing to mention, two things quickly to mention, and then we can wrap up otherwise.
Go ahead.
Okay, no comments. Okay, so quickly, we received a copy of the draft comprehensive plan from Whiteland Township. I circulated it today via email.
Saw that.
So it's just an MPC option that we have. We're not required to, but if you have any comments when you look at it, feel free to funnel them through Brittany and I. We can send them on to the county and to Whiteland. The county's lead consultant. That's why I say county on that. The other thing I wanted to make mention of was we had a workshop meeting with the Board of Supervisors this past Monday on a number of zoning ordinance amendments that we've been kind of kicking around internally. And they will be coming to you pending authorization from the board. So likely what they'll do is they'll come to you in advance of the ones that are ready to be authorized. We'll come to you in May and or June in advance of a hearing in June and or July. So they'll be coming to you as they normally do. Steep slopes is one of them. The Great Valley revitalization overlay that we talked about with Philly Suburban the last few months there, the corporate center, that'll be coming to you. But there's a couple that need just a little bit more work. So I wanted to at least put that on your radar.
Yeah, it looks like your May meeting is going to be busy with all these ordinances. So count on a late night.
Thanks, Joe.
It may not be too bad, but yeah, we'll get you some stuff to review in advance. And, you know, if you have questions in advance of that, certainly feel free to reach out. We can, you know, maybe answer questions before they.
And more than 2 days in advance.
More than 2. We'll get up to you more than the Friday before.
I hope.
I thought that meeting was very good, by the way.
I agree.
Went better than I thought it would be.
You never know. You never know these meetings.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have nothing else to add.
I just have one anecdotal comment to add, which is that since we had a little bit of a discussion by email, I have not seen anybody on the railroad track.
Oh,
yeah. I haven't been by there recently, but yeah, always feel I did relay that message to our chief of police, just, you know, for their own information.
Maybe there were individuals who were advised to be careful and not do that. Who knows?
Maybe one of our officers, you know, let them know.
What are you talking about?
Talking about?
The railroad just immediately south of Route 30 and parallel to Route 30 that goes right through Bishop Tube property. There were people with carts and funky clothes walking up and down the grade.
It was actually me. I was just coming back from band practice, but
yeah.
Great track.
I like to go down on the tracks after band practice and throw a few back.
So I'm assuming residents saw this somehow because they were on the tracks or what?
Yep, Jeff and I observed it. Yes.
Residents, Jeff and John. Yeah.
John sent an email out observing it, but he was thinking I think the Bishop Tube area, but it was just a coincidence that when I was driving down 352 to Route 30, I looked to my left and I'm like, there's people walking right in the middle of the tracks.
Oh.
It happened the same day or a day after John sent that email. So
I must have missed that.
Yeah, I'd seen it 3 or 4 times and thought, oh, this is the trend. I wondered if it was homeless people or who knew what it was, but so I passed it on. And then Jeff responded and said, yeah, I saw that too. And Zach followed up on it. And maybe that's solved the problem, but it's pretty scary.
Yeah, if you see things, let us know.
All right. So it was a good meeting tonight. Sorry I was a bit late, folks. My grill had a problem.
It's okay. All right, all. Anything else?
All right.
Bye, Jeff's well, that's all.
All right, well, thank you all and have a great night.
Have a great night.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
Be well, Dante.
I'll
Yeah,
try.
Dante.
I'm gonna stay off my feet for 6 weeks, so.
Oh. I guess you're working from home for the next 6 weeks. COVID's going to go a little longer for you.
I was working from home anyway, so.
Next time we see Dante, his beard's gonna be down to his belly.
Yeah, right. All right, guys, take it easy.
Take care.